On the Edge, in association with Uncensored Magazine.
But he did go to...
Welcome back to On the Edge. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen, and I'm here with Charlie Skelton from The Guardian and Channel 4, and we are talking about the Bilderberg Group. Shh, because it's a secret and you're not supposed to know. But now we all know what's going on with Bilderberg. We've gone through it in the last hour. So to our viewers online and members on the special live stream, this is The Overdrive, and we're going to get deeper into the Bilderberg Group, and also we're going to get a lot deeper into their agenda, the global agenda, and we're going to also look at some of these texts that have been coming in. I've got one gentleman unnamed. He says, Iceland. He's all, what happened with Iceland with regards to the Bilderberg agenda? The bust has turned into a boom. Now, Iceland is very interesting because I'm looking at the situation in Greece. Greece didn't have the balls to opt out of the euro last year, so they took the haircut, they got in debt, and now they're going to probably fall out of the euro anyway. Now, Iceland's a success story. They've turned, they turned around. Well, they first put two fingers up to the British banking system and said, well, that's not our debt. They did a kind of a free man on the land thing as a sovereign nation. Yeah. It's a success story.
Yeah, and it's not talked about very much.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people that don't want it talked about that much because of the way it's worked. But in terms of Greece, I remember very pointedly I was down at Occupy London outside St Paul's. There was a meeting going on, and someone came up and spoke, and he worked at a bank, and he said, he came up to the microphone, it's very powerful, he said, I've just seen democracy die today. I work at a bank and I watched the numbers go down on my screen the whole day, and it was the day that it was around that time that the Greek Prime Minister said we're going to have a referendum on the Greek bailout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that.
And he was removed. He was removed, and he was like, and a member of the Rockefeller-run Trilateral Commission. Do I mean Trilateral Commission? Which one of them?
Former board of directors of the European Central Bank. Yeah. Then gets parachuted in.
Yeah, Papandreou, and he goes in, and he said, I watched the banks kind of turn on him, and they could see trouble, and he was just like,
because he wanted a referendum.
Yeah, and they didn't, and so the technocrat gets put in charge.
Luke Skywalker, I call him. Luke Skywalker, yeah. So Super Mario and Luke Skywalker.
You can really see the technocrats coming out of the woodwork at the moment.
Mm. Well, the thing about Greece, that it's absolutely pivotal. I mean, if you look back through history, right, even at the end of the Second World War, at Yalta, the big bargaining chip on the whole chessboard was Greece, all the way back to Yalta. So here we are again in 2012, and Greece is playing a very, very pivotal position in which way destiny might turn for Europe. Yeah, yeah. And also, this will be the destiny of the Bilderbergers as well, because the European Union and the single currency is their baby.
Yeah, yeah.
That's been their baby from the beginning. So how this fetters out with Greece.
They may just decide to kind of shrink a little to preserve the integrity of their project. Yeah. And just go, we'll come back to Greece in a bit. We'll see what happens.
We got another text from Denise, and she says, do the Bilderbergers control China? Now, this is a good question, because I often thought, are there any Chinese or any Russians present at the Bilderberg meeting? Because they're in a kind of a different country club over there once you get east of the European Union border.
Well, there were a couple of Chinese delegates in 2011 in St. Moritz, which was quite unusual. So, and they're on the very, very limited agenda that they do publish on their website. When they talked about what they said, this is what we discussed this year, and they had conflict areas, demographic challenges, and China. The word China appeared at least in their discussion. I mean, that's about as much information as they share with us. Mm-hmm. We discussed China. They might as well have said we discussed some things. But yeah, so a couple of the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ying Fu, was there, and she seemed quite jolly in all the photos. I've got a little bit of a crush on Ying Fu. I've got to admit it. But you'll see if you look up the pictures from Sam Ritz. She's fun.
Have you got a website that you put any of your stuff on with?
Well, it's all on
Bilderberg,
all the stuff on the Guardian.
It's on the
you can
Guardian.
Just look at it.
Just do Bilderberg, Charlie
yeah.
Skelton.
Yeah, and there's
It'll all come up
reams
online.
of stuff that I've churned out.
I think it's really interesting because you have the BRICS nations now. You know, Russia, China, India, South Africa, Brazil. You know, this new sort of bloc forming, and the difference between the BRICS countries and the Anglo-American empire is the BRICS countries actually manufacture things. Okay, the manufacturing from North America, the United States, has been offshored to, for the most part, to China, Indonesia, and a few banana republics in the Southern Hemisphere. Now, Brazil has the largest. General Motors has migrated to Brazil. They're one of the largest auto exporters in the world, oil producers, minerals, you name it, gold, lithium, etc. And China, rare earths, they control 90% of the world's rare earths. And Russia is now the #1 producer of oil on the planet. They just surpassed Saudi Arabia last year.
Really?
Okay, so the BRICS countries, and South Africa is also the deal maker for Africa. They're the most dominant political country on the continent. So in that BRICS, and India, another billion people and a huge workforce. In the BRICS, if the BRICS could start their own Bilderberg Group, I mean, do they have their own Bilderberg Steering Committee?
Well, they
their
have
own version of the Bilderberg Group?
They do have the Trilateral Commission is the kind of American-Asian sort of branch of, sister of Bilderberg, where Bilderberg sits, around the kind of Anglo-Dutch sort of area of the globe. That sits further over, the American East. So
there's a big new Brzezinski, Jimmy Carter, Henry Kissinger was a trilateralist as well.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting organization.
There's so much stuff to get your head around. I just have to go, okay, look, do you know what? There's enough just in Bilderberg. And then you talk about the Council on Foreign Relations. You talk about the European Council on Foreign Relations.
Oh, they have the European.
Yeah. It's just that makes interesting reading. There's so many of these things. They're so busy. I hate to use the word they, but within this group of, let's call them the technocrat class, whatever you want to call them, the managers of the world planned economy, they just constantly getting together, putting steering committee after steering committee with project after plan after.
Busy steering.
I know. I wish they did. Everyone says, oh, they're just out playing golf. I wish they were.
Yeah.
I wish they just played golf.
Yeah.
I think the world would be a better place.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. Now let's get to our man Obama. I just got back from the States. I did a investigation on his birth certificate and his Social Security number, which I did a great report with InfoWars, had Dr. Jerome Corsi and some of these great guys in there. Now Obama, how's this worked out for the Bilderbergers? Because I am under the opinion that Obama has done a brilliant job for his bosses in 4 years. He's fast-tracked things on the agenda that George W. Bush couldn't have dreamed of getting across that quickly.
I guess if you were to put it under the heading of broadly police state, that's where I'd see one of the strengths of that administration and of personal data and that kind of the building up of this extraordinary machine of kind of data gathering and data sharing and data analysis and profiling. And all of that, using the internet as this huge tool. And we talked a bit about the kind of internet generation of young Turks who are now being coaxed into Bilderberg. And that's why, because there's this massive tool of whatever I don't know what you call the internet, but one of the things it is it's a massive data mining exercise.
Yeah.
Apart from anything else. It's also a great thing for sharing stuff like we're talking about, fantastic for that. But it also gives this, it's a profiling tool as well.
Yeah.
We must be these dreadful little blips on their chart,
Yeah.
as would be everyone watching. You're all a blip.
We're part of a pie segment.
Yeah.
On there.
And so I think they're happy with the way this is coming along, and it's coming along apace.
Obama, I think the establishment has a lot invested in Obama, and a lot of political capital invested in Obama. He was groomed out of college. He worked for Henry Kissinger. He Zbigniew Brzezinski. He has very, very much CIA pedigree within his family, and maybe that's the reason why all his college and university records are frozen. That was his first executive order he signed when he
Really?
got into office, was the sealing of all his personal records, and he has spent millions, I think as $4 or $7 million from Coey Perkins, a law firm in Seattle, to basically in court to give him the right to freeze all his college records, transcripts, student loans, applications, grades. We don't even know if he went to class. So a lot of this came out in this investigation. I did it with Sheriff Joe Arpaio in Phoenix. We did the film with InfoWars, but again, a lot of people who haven't been privy to this material would never connect someone like Obama with the Bilderberg Group, because he's come from the streets of Chicago, apparently, and that's the media narrative that they've fashioned around this guy. But yet he's got a seat at the table at Bilderberg. At least he was there in 2008, right?
Yeah, well, and you've got, absolutely, and you've got, you can see the first job, Kissinger Associates, and you've got Henry Kissinger there with his, bony hand on his shoulder, sort of steering him along, and I find it remarkable, and not many years ago I was one of the people that would have thought this, where you buy into the narrative of this guy just coming up and somehow managing to,
the underdog.
Amazing how he's just come through this almost like champion lawyer kind of civil rights. Either he's being reinvented now as a civil rights activist sort of thing.
Yeah. Apparently he was a constitutional law teacher, although I find that hard to
I
believe.
guess he knows his enemy.
Okay, now I'm going to moving on swiftly to the Occupy movement.
Right.
Okay, that's where I first met you, down at Occupy London, and the Occupy movement. Where does this sit? Because I believe that the Occupy movement, and I said this on U.S. radio about a month ago. I was asked about the Occupy movement. I said, I support the Occupy movement 120%, but I wish it would grow a brain.
Yeah.
And the Occupy movement really, if it's to be successful, it needs to challenge the true engine of poverty in our society, in this country. And I'm talking about the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve, the central banking, which controls inflation, which makes you and me poorer each week. And allows us not to be able to save any money, not to have any real liquidity, not to move up or, do the things that we would like to do, because it would always be the law of diminishing returns. So if the Occupy movement could somehow face off with the central banking system, would they be more effective, or the Bilderberg Group, for instance?
These are conversations which are, I'm not hugely involved with Occupy London, but I am a bit. I occasionally go along to their economics working group, which is fun and full of intelligent people talking about exactly what you're talking about. And I think that it is groping its way towards these deeper problems.
They genuinely. They were at the Bank of England.
Absolutely.
3 days ago, I believe. Yeah.
And
I was very encouraged to see that. I thought, wow,
they made a statement about when they announced that a former, I'm going to get this wrong again, probably, but a former managing director of Goldman Sachs or something had been put forward as a possible new head of
Lloyd Blankfein.
I don't think so, but new to replace Mervyn King at the Bank of England.
Okay.
And the Occupy put out a statement saying, this would be a disaster, because they get it. Occupy does understand that Goldman Sachs is a monstrous entity in the world. It is the giant squid, and it was very heartening to see that statement coming out of Occupy. And one problem I had with Occupy
instead of just the 99% versus the 1%.
Which is
but,
wrong.
But focusing.
But they've started changing their numbers. Occupy has now started saying the 0.001%. But now they're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking about the 0.001%, it's meaningful.
Yes.
The 1% isn't meaningful.
No.
So it's just a nonsense statistic if
Yeah.
you look at the numbers in the world.
It's a Saul Alinsky slogan.
Yeah.
Of to divide and conquer.
But the 0.001 or 0.0001 or however you want to express it, then you're going, okay, fine. That's where the chart of wealth goes whoop, up at that point. You know,
and it's a more intelligent analysis of the society. Instead, you know, it is 0.01%. That the concentration of wealth is such.
Yeah, absolutely. And once they're talking in those terms, then they can start talking about the influence of Goldman Sachs. They can start talking about the influence of Bilderberg. They can see Mario Monti. They can see Greece, what's happening there.
They can see the technocrat.
Yeah, they can
what is
see
the
them.
technocrat? They know who it is.
They get that. They're big on Occupy is big on democracy. It's big on direct participatory democracy. They like to feel engaged in the democratic process. And Bilderberg is the exact opposite of everything they stand for, actually. And they kind of, I feel like they're getting that. And, you know, suddenly we've got this phrase, Occupy Bilderberg, which is, you know, going to manifest itself in Chantilly, Virginia, in some form, I'm sure. And with those two words coming together, Occupy Bilderberg, that's a very new and exciting phrase.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
you wouldn't have thought that a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
They would have got that far.
So, yeah, I'm very excited about that, and I think it's a big step forward for activism generally.
I think that would be funny if they actually managed to occupy Bilderberg. That would be great. That happened. Well, I'll tell you a little story about the Copenhagen Climate Summit in 2009. But yeah, they tried to occupy that. Okay, we're going to take a short break, and we're going to be back with you in a few seconds. We're going to go into a little more detail about some of the things we've just been talking about. So we'll see you in a second.
On the Edge, in association with Uncensored Magazine. On the Edge, in association with Uncensored Magazine.
Welcome back to On the Edge, and we are in our second hour of Overdrive. We're here with Charlie Skelton. We're talking about the Bilderberg Group, and we're also kind of talking about now the Occupy movement. And I've got some interesting text messages from some of our listeners. One of them is from Ian, and he says, is capitalism failing? And this is an excellent question because I hear this all the time. And I hear this on the U.S. media, and I hear this from the Occupy movement and the protests on the streets. Capitalism is failing, and so we need to get rid of capitalism and we need to replace it with something else, communism, you know, which is kind of what's inferred. What about this? I hear this all the time. You've seen loads of it.
Yeah. And my answer to this is always simply look at what's happening to the wealth that's just over the last 4 years. There's been a huge transfer of wealth and resources into the hands of the bankers. You know, these bailouts are
trickle-up economics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But just like with the gun at the back of their head, they've been handing money to the bankers. And, you know, and Bilderberg is one of its things. It's a collection of very, very powerful bankers. Deutsche Bank, HSBC, Barclays, they're all there. And they're making out like bandits. It's not it's a massive success story. It looks a bit creaky and it's a bit edgy at times, you know, what's being, you know, the world financial system at the moment. But actually, in terms of where the money's going, and it's working just great. It's a huge success story.
The door might be a bit creaky, but the engine's running fine.
Oh yeah.
With regards to their system at the moment.
Well, I think so. I mean, you know, what do I know?
See, the Greek, how I would say the Greek haircut, the Greek bailout. This is basically how it works. I'm the European Central Bank, and I am basically a consortium of a group of banks. We'll call them Deutsche Bank. We'll call it Lazard, Societe Generale, Bank of Zurich. Okay, you're Greece, so you need a bailout because you can't pay your bills, you can't pay your public servants, you can't pay your salaries, your transport is not running. So I'm going to give you a bailout. This is the loan. Here you go, Greece. That's it. I'm giving you all that money. I'm such a nice guy. Yeah. Okay, but you're going to give that back to me because you already owe me compound interest running all the way back to 1960, and plus all the new stuff that I've given you. I'm going to take that right back, and that money is just going to be circulated. In fact, I could do better in the long run and actually take more liquidity back off you in terms of state assets. Your national gold mine, your water system, your electric grid. I'll have all that.
So it's money, on one level it's money laundering, they're just washing money through sovereign nations. On another level it's asset stripping. And
that's the big part. The asset stripping is the big part. Because that's the real wealth.
Well, I remember hearing, I was in the car and I was listening to Resonance FM, which I sometimes do to listen to their strange things they put on. And Max Kaiser was on there, the economist, and he was in Athens, and he was there, and he saw the big vulture fund kind of asset stripper bankers, literally saw them there in Athens, whilst people were throwing stones up one end of the street and tear gas was being fired. They were there just carving it up. And absolutely, we started to see now, today and yesterday, that vulture funds, we're getting that's started to be mentioned around Greece. They're just going to pick it over its bones, Yeah,
it's a really interesting, there's a very, you've probably seen the film by, I believe it's Richard Curtis, The Power of Nightmares. He's a Channel 4. Adam Curtis. The Power of Nightmares, everybody knows that. But he made another film in 1998 called The Mayfair Set.
Right.
And this was about Tiny Rowland and Walker and Sir James Goldsmith. These were the original corporate raiders, the original junk bond, the purveyors of the American junk bond collapse in the 80s. And they basically invented, put game theory into the markets. Because before that, if you owned stock in the markets, it wasn't something that was sort of gambled on a daily basis. It was like you had stock in IBM or you had stock in British Steel, that was worth something, and that stayed in the family holdings. You might sell off a few shares, but then this Walker was the accountant from Surrey who became the richest man in England in a matter of a decade, and working with Goldsmith, and they were just basically, taking over companies, hostile takeovers, but it was based on game theory. And from then on, the markets had its own intelligence, and it's whatever the market wanted, or whatever the market made. And so now we're in that paradigm. We're in the next generation of that paradigm now in 2000, where the system is done feeding. There's no more wealth or value really in the stock market. So all that's left to feed on, they've done Africa, they've done South America, they've done as much as they can in Asia. Now the system is feeding on itself. Is that a fair analysis of where we're at now?
I think, well, it's, these are obviously huge problems that we're having to describe using, almost mythic terms.
It's like the album Pop is eating, or that group Pop is eating itself. It's sort of like the banking system's kind of now just kind of feeding. It's got,
Well, Adam Curtis is interesting. You mentioned him. If you look at what he talks about in his movies, he's on the right track.
He's on the right track.
Yeah, and he's. I think, and I haven't even seen this yet, but do you know what? I'm going to go and watch it. I think his last thing has been on think tanks and foundations.
Okay.
And once you're into think tanks and foundations, you're getting closer, and you're getting closer to
you're getting the source.
Yeah.
The source of public policy.
Yeah. And you can see the think tanks in the history of Bilderberg. They're very powerful. The Rockefeller Foundation, Ford Foundation. We've got the Hudson Institute, and one of the big players in Bilderberg is the wife of, I'm sure she'd love to be described as this, the wife of Henry Kravis, who's the head of KKR, a big American investment fund. And but she's much more powerful than he is, and you can actually watch this in the images how powerful she is. And
have we got I think we got a picture of her. Q105.
No, I think that might be.
Is that?
No, that's the Queen of. That's Queen Beatrix.
That's Queen Beatrix
on the right there. Yeah, that is the.
And she's a regular at the Bilderberg meetings,
it's
right?
Kind of her. It's kind of Beatrix's thing. You know, she sort of, it's her and Rockefeller and
That's her
Kissinger.
annual bake sale for the New World Order, isn't it?
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
there with the brownies,
Yeah,
Kool-Aid.
Absolutely. There's a lot of people wonder why, you know, why is the Queen of Spain there? Why is the Queen of Holland there? You know, why is royalty there? And it is a slightly odd question. Some people think it's so that they can have these levels of security. You know, it's just handy to have a queen around because it means you can pump everything up.
Yeah.
You know, you can have the navy there.
Well, that's a good point.
You know,
and it's for
but also, it is. You know, there's a lot of old, big money and ownership in people like Queen Beatrix.
in the royal families.
You know,
of
Royal Dutch Shell.
Yeah.
You know, her relationship to that company isn't exactly straightforward, but
But she's probably a big shareholder, I would
some
imagine.
people say, you know,
Yeah.
some people say yes, a very big shareholder in that.
Or a bondholder.
Do you know what?
And this is another thing. You know, there's a difference between shareholders, like you and I can buy shares. We can be a shareholder in a bank or a company, but then there's the bondholder. And this is like the bondholder of the Bank of England. I would like to know who this family is or who this individual or individuals are. The bondholders are the ones that own the bank.
Yeah.
They're not just the shareholders. So I think I would venture to guess that there's a few bondholders at the Bilderberg meetings.
Yeah, and well, interestingly, you mentioned that one of the things that Occupy London has been talking about is transparency of the Bank of England, and it's a not particularly transparent entity. It's probably slightly more transparent than the Federal Reserve, but
it's a private bank, right?
Well, do you know,
it is on record. It's a number of official admissions have confirmed, and it used to be, I believe, on their website, that it was a privately owned bank. It is not a state bank, right?
Well, I'm going to pass on this one because it's a tricky one, and there's all kind of different opinions on it. But anyway, it's good to know that Occupy London, at least it's got that on their on their radar as well.
Yeah, exactly.
But something that we're going to talk about Occupy is the fact that there actually is quite a political self-awareness there of the danger of co-option. I mean, you spoke at Occupy at St. Paul's on that subject.
And I wrote an article in the Guardian about
it,
that,
And which is very important, you know, because a movement like Occupy, which can be steered and co-opted and infiltrated and has been, I've seen it myself firsthand, it has to be self-aware. And that's the only guard you have against co-option is to be self-aware. And absolutely assume that whatever room you're in,
always.
And it's a bit like Occupy Bilderberg. You know that if it gets big enough, there'll be troublemakers put in, and there'll be
provocateurs.
There'll be agents provocateurs. But the thing about Bilderberg, and this is why it's an extraordinary event in terms of the people around it, they are hugely switched on, the people there, and they are the
high level of political awareness.
Very high level, the highest level of political awareness I've encountered. I get to spend a week every year with people that know their stuff, right? And it's great. And you just sit, it's like being in a warm bath of information, and you just go, oh my God, thank God these people, at least someone knows what's going on. Anyway, but, good luck trying to get away with agent provocateur stuff outside Bilderberg, because everyone there is going to be completely waiting for it.
They'll be able to spot the federal
everyone
agent.
They'll step away going, look, come on, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Anyway, but one of the things that Occupy London did was to say there was a very strong attempt to co-opt it by the Socialist Worker Party and the hard left of British politics. Yep. And they said, we're not going to have that. Take down your banners, take your placards, take your flags. We're not political. Get off our forecourt kind of thing. And they did that, and it was a very powerful thing they did. And they kind of beat away the co-option of the left, because in its way Occupy is trying not to be left or right, in the same way that anyone talking about anything we're talking about now, if you look at Bilderberg, it's so beyond left and right. The idea that it doesn't matter who's there.
If you accept the reality of Bilderberg, it means that you basically reject the false left-right paradigm
completely
that our rulers or our society has fed us, which is basically in this country, in Britain, and in America, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So you have the Democrats and you have the Republicans.
Yeah.
In Britain, you have Labour and you have Conservative. Well, in Britain, Labour is Chelsea and Conservative is Man United, okay? And basically, it doesn't matter who wins the league title. As long as the stadiums are full, people are buying the jerseys, and the television ratings are high, the owners of the league then don't care who wins. And basically, Man United and Chelsea are allowed to fight over the scraps, which are basically jobs for life, government contracts, good CV positions for their so that they, once they're in government, they can then sit on the board of directors of numerous different companies. But over the owners of the league, I could say Bilderberg represents the owners of the league. In that sense.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, you've got around the same table. You've got, not that people of different political persuasion shouldn't talk. Obviously, they should talk. You know, and there's, you know, and people with different worldviews. I mean, of course, should be around a table. But you know, when you've got Peter Mandelson and from the British left, and George Osborne and Cameron from the right, and Tony Blair over here, and you know, further back you've got Dennis Healey, and you've got it doesn't matter, left, right, doesn't, you know, they're just
Margaret Thatcher said it herself. My greatest achievement is New Labour. 10 years of New Labour, advanced conservative policies and privatization efforts that she couldn't have achieved during her time.
Was she?
So the Tony Blairs of the world, the Peter Mandelsons of the world, are in the Bilderberg Group. Mandelson's a globalist operator. Tony Blair and Associates now, you know, essentially a globalist, deal-making holding company whose bills are being paid by the UN.
But you look at Tony Blair these days. He gave evidence at the whatever it was, Chilcot.
My favorite person. He's my favorite guy in the world, by the way.
He's terrifying.
He's my favorite person in the world, Tony Blair. I've got a poster of him in my bedroom. I don't know.
I'm just sick of seeing these people that they're not really. They can't, you know, you feel like you want to go like that in front of their face and go, are you genuinely with me here? You're not. You know, there's an amazing book called by a Jewish scholar called Martin Buber called I and Thou, in which he analyzes human relations on the most primal level, and it's he calls it, you know, this I-thou relationship of two people together being in communication, addressing themselves towards it, and you have someone like Tony Blair, and I remember I saw David Cameron before he was leader, I think even leader of the Conservative Party, did a speech. I was with a friend of mine, and we came away going, he's not really. That wasn't a real person, was it? And I've got some other friends who met David Miliband in the park. I won't say who they are, but they met him in the park, had a chat, and they came away afterwards and said, it was weird. He didn't respond he sort of like he failed the Turing test, you know? It's like, come on, you feel like you want to hit them prod them with a fork to at least make them respond in a human fashion. I'm
going to have to agree with you, because I was misfortunate or fortunate enough to have met Tony Blair, John Major, and Margaret Thatcher. But the one that left the most limp-wristed, literally limp-wristed, handshake, everything impression was Tony Blair. Fake smile and everything. And I just felt like it was pointless to meet him, or even for the few seconds we met and shook hands. This was in Downing Street's back garden. Right. And I thought, what was the point of that, you know? Well,
at least Thatcher, to her credit, whatever you say about Thatcher, there is the story that she went to Bilderberg and then just came away and went, you know what, I'm not that into giving up British sovereignty.
Yeah, and I half believe that would be the case.
But, you know, take that with a bucket of salt. But,
sure.
You know, but
John Major, he's board of directors of the Carlyle Group. Yeah. Which
you got to love the Carlyle Group.
The Carlyle Group is a major player on the global scene. They've also made some major media acquisitions. There's a lot of news.
Bush Senior, I think, is Carlyle Group.
Bush Senior is one of the founders of the Carlyle Group. Yeah, so they're in the mix there. But anyway, we'll talk about some of these things when we come back from break. And when we come back from break, we're also going to look through some of these text messages that have come in from some of our viewers who've raised a lot of interesting points. So just wait for us, and we'll see you in a second.
On the Edge, in association with Uncensored Magazine.